And this next chart, you look at India and China, since they started using more and more energy, as their energy use goes up, their GDP goes up, their life expectancy goes up again. And here then we see the problem with solar and wind. I think this is a great chart. Can you walk us through this one?
Sure. So the demand is just capturing that, electricity demand has different types of regular ups and downs. Like, you're using more light at night, and you're using sometimes more air conditioning during the day, and certainly more industry during the day. So that's why you see these peaks and troughs, but then there are also unexpected things. And so what you need is you need a highly controllable supply to meet this, varying and sometimes uncontrollable demand. And you see that there are points at which wind and solar happen to meet most of the demand. So you see this peak, the second peak is showing, oh, they're 90% of demand. And what you get is you get all the activists saying, look, Germany was powered by 90% renewable today. Why don't we do this? We're so behind. But there are no reports the day when they're less than 5% demand. But if they can go to less than 5% of demand at any given time, that means you always need the capacity to provide basically 100% of the supply. And so what's going on is you have all these huge infrastructure duplication costs because you need to pay for the unreliable grid and the reliable grid together. And what'll happen is that adds cost. So you get pressure from that, and then also just pressure from activists to shut down as many reliable power plants as possible. I call this reliability chicken, because you're basically saying, you're basically going back to praying to the weather gods. You hope the sun shines enough and the wind blows enough and it doesn't get too hot or too cold. And what we saw with Texas in 2021, for example, is, well, sometimes it gets cold, and then you don't have much solar and you don't have much wind. And so at one point, solar and wind were providing 1% of their theoretical capacity, not because wind turbines froze, but just because the wind wasn't blowing sufficiently. And they had not been investing sufficiently in reliable electricity, even though their demand was increasing. And they definitely didn't invest enough in the weatherization of their reliable electricity. And so they basically needed to quadruple their gas generation, and it didn't quite work. So gas generated most of the electricity, but they still had all these blackouts and there were some operator errors. But this reliability chicken is just more and more becoming the policy. And to go back to our earlier point, this is all totally unnecessary. What you need controllable, reliable electricity. And I'm all for people being able to use solar and wind if they guarantee reliability to the grid. So if you want to use solar and wind and batteries and gas plants, and you can do that yourself and be a black box that generates reliable electricity, that is great. But unfortunately, today's laws allow you to sell unreliable electricity to the grid for the same price, or often with subsidies, a far higher price than reliables. And so is it any wonder we're shutting down reliables and building more unreliables?